We are going to discuss what is in the Quran. Could you please share your background and the interest in the Quran and any events which may have prompted you in this direction?
Thank you very much for sharing my understanding and what I have learned from the Quran with all of you. My journey towards the Quran started around 1991 when I was watching a television program where someone said that Quran's verses are very, very powerful. And he quoted a verse, Alimat nafsum ma qaddamat wa akharat, which meant was that the man will know what he has sent forward and what he's left behind. And I suddenly realized that I have never studied the Quran in detail. Brought up as a normal Muslim, I had some access to the Quran and to its translations, but never looked into it in detail. So what I did was that I started, while I was working in the university, I started studying various books and literature on Islam, and also a tafsir, an exposition in Urdu. I also studied the life biography of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And what I found was that I got some details, but it was not very satisfying because I was not getting the answer which could bring a change in myself. And whoever I asked around me, they couldn't answer that. And particular question I had was, what is Iman? And they all said, you just have belief or faith. And I said, but belief and faith do not give me Iman because there is no conviction here. I'm just studying, and what I am reading is not really, getting into my consciousness. And then by chance in 1993, a friend of mine gave me the book by Mr. Parwez, Ghulam Ahmad Parwez, Islam, A Challenge to Religion. And there was a couple of other books. And when I started studying this book, what he had done was he brought together the human thought of the last many, many thousand years, and then put it together and said that what solutions human thought has discovered so far, or found so far, and which have created problems though it has moved forward. And then from the opposite end, he presented the solutions given by the Quran in terms of the values. And the way he discussed it, and particularly the aspect of the law of requital, where he explained the verse which says that each human being is accountable for his deeds and nobody will be dealt with unjustly. And that was the hard-hitting explanation. And I said, oh, I never realized that I am accountable for my deeds. I thought I could do whatever I like. So that is my background, which forced me. And also when I was a child, I came from a fairly humble background, and I saw poverty as well. And whenever I visited villages in Pakistan, I saw a lot of poverty. And it moved me, and I said, they are all children like me. I could literally empathize with them or relate with their issues, but I didn't have a solution. But now when I started looking at the literature, which was particularly written by Ghulam Ahmad Parwez, he had discussed these issues right at a fundamental level. And being in the West, in the UK, I could see those issues in the world from different perspectives. The decisions made in the West and those impacting in the third world, for example, colonization. And I also looked at it and I said, why do human beings do it to others? And that is how I came to the Quran.
In your view, what are the limitations of human intellect that it needs external guidance?
Very good question. And this bothered me for a long time, that what exactly am I? We see these YouTube videos as well. Now, at a fundamental level, each one of us wishes to increase his own happiness and minimize his own pain. And then we recognize bad more than the good. Similarly, we don't want to be held accountable for our deeds. And then we have basic emotions of greed, prejudices, and all these. And then we are very competitive. And all these things have a limitation. And another point is that we progressively acquire knowledge as we live our life. You know, we are a child, we have limited vision, and then gradually as we go through the system, education system, depending on where we are, we acquire education and training, and all this is most of the time focused on earning a living. So if we look at a typical life, let's say a typical life of a middle class family, it will be children, education, training, going through the school, going into the university, getting a degree, getting married, getting a job, having few children, going through the midlife crisis, becoming old, and then die. And accumulate some wealth, have a house, few cars, and then the children will start the same cycle again. And if we look at the rich man, it is not very different. The only difference is that he accumulates more wealth as compared to the middle class. And if we look at the poor man's life, it is all struggle. The children born into poverty, they remain generally poor, probably they just sustain. If they're in the Western society, they will at least be given enough to sustain their life. And if they are in a country like India, Pakistan, or in Africa, they will face horrendous amount of poverty. Even basic needs are not met. So these are the limitations of human beings, which I found that they need some kind of a guidance. And since we don't have inner guidance, then from where are we going to get the guidance? And then the question of death also came, faced me, and I said, what happens after death? And this thing didn't come to my mind till I was in 40s, that why death is universal. We do so much in this life, particularly the middle class people. I got an MSc and a PhD. Am I just going to die and will lose everything? It didn't make sense. So that is what forced me to delve more into the Quran. And the beauty of Parwez's writing is that he draws lessons from all other religions. He has very incisively looked at the religions and their emotive basis. And the problem with religions is that it has a lot of contamination of human desires and mind into it. And that is why it is mixed up with the values of the revelation. And Parwez has explained it extremely well in his books, like The Human Self and Allah, or What is Islam, or The Life in the Hereafter, and Islam, A Challenge to Religion. So if someone wants to look into these aspects, they must look at these books.
Could you throw some light on the way human beings think at the fundamental level without the Quranic guidance?
Human beings always think for their own benefit. This is the way they are. Their emotions, what happens is, for example, my desire comes to my mind, and my intellect will help me to achieve that desire. Now, there are two ways to achieve that desire. One is I have the means, then that is fine. I'll be able to, for example, I want to buy a car, and that is my desire. And in some cases, I may not need it because I already have a car, but now I have seen a better car, or a classic car, for example. And I want to buy that. Whether I need it or don't need it, that is not a question which my desire will tell me. I want to buy a car. Partly sometimes it comes to my mind that do I need it? And then that question will never come. If I don't need it, I've got that spare money. Could I give it to some poor people? No, that will never. Most of the time it doesn't strike your mind. Now my intellect, what it does is that it teaches me or opens up the path that how I'm going to achieve that desire. For example, if I don't have means, it will tell me to seek another job, or take a loan, or borrow from your parents, or borrow from a friend, and you go and buy that car. Of course, it has consequences. In many cases where people are criminal, it might teach me, my intellect might say that you strongly desire this car, go and rob someone, or snatch the car of someone. And that is where the crime comes in. So this is the relationship. If we look at it, there is no guidance here. What is driving me around is my own desire. And Bertrand Russell once said that the purpose of life is to fulfill my desires or your desires. And then he said that, of course, this is going to create problems in the world. And there is no solution for that, and this is what is happening in our present world. Everyone is following their desires. The rich are accumulating more than they require. And if we look at the TV, or listen to the radio or any newspaper, nobody talks about the needs of each one of us. And that needs question can only come into us when we have a purpose of life, that the life goes beyond death. If the life ends with death, then everyone is desperate to fulfill his own desires. And that is why when people, I watch on the television sometimes, they say that so-and-so's life is saved. And I say, no, it is not saved, because we are all going to die. It has been just prolonged. And that is the point we should think for a moment, is this the purpose of life? Just fulfill your physical desires. Don't think of the consequences of what you are doing in your life, and leave the poverty the way it is and not solve it. And now we are talking of like the climate change. In the climate change, nobody talks of the poverty. They are only talking of the rich and the powerful are only talking of climate change in relation to their own self. Is climate change, doing something for the climate change takes priority, or solving the problems of fellow humanity should take priority? And these are the hard questions. And the answers for those questions we cannot find anywhere else except the Quran.
The Quran states, for example, in the verse 2/23, that no human mind can produce anything like the Quran. In your study and understanding, could you elaborate this verse and the Quranic guidance which makes this statement more comprehensible?
That's a very good question. Actually, this is the question which needs to be answered by each one of us, whoever is taking the studies of the Quran. If we understand our own intellect and its limitations and its being finite, we will then look at the Quran and we will say that the Quran does not think like human beings at a basic level. The Quran, if it is the product of the infinite being, Allah himself, then it is coming from the fully developed, completely developed being. And this has to be different from someone who is progressively developing himself. So the Quran presents itself as a whole reality. When I looked at this verse and I looked at the Quran, I said, there is no way human being can produce anything about which it does not have the ability to think in the first place. Right. I'll give you an example, as we discussed in the previous question, that each one of us wants to maximize his own happiness and minimize his own pain. The Quran is talking about the happiness of everyone. So invariably, if I'm talking about my happiness by accumulating more money, I'm creating unhappiness for others. And that means that it is against the Quran. Then the Quran says, do justice even if it is against your own self. No human being would like to do that. You know, once people are caught up in some wrong they have done, they want to escape the justice system, human justice system. Then the Quran says that each one of us is accountable for his own deeds. That is the reason that the universe has been created. We don't want to take responsibility. Over here it is saying that you are responsible whether you like it or not. And then Quran has verses which are dealing with the outer universe and science and laws and natural way. But not only that, but if we look at the values of the Quran and the concept of Allah, it simply cannot be a product of human mind. Because what it is dealing with is the real issues of life based on facts. For example, the concept of the hereafter which the Quran gives us is based on fact from someone who knows it. Similarly, the issues which we face in this life and the solutions it presents are optimal solutions which human beings so far have not been able to deal with. We have only created misery in the world, exploitation in the world, wars in the world. If all of us are equal human beings and all of us have a hereafter, then why do we fight with each other? The Quran says you don't need to fight with each other. You don't need to have conflicts. You don't need to have injustices in the life. And it draws our attention to, as equal human beings, that wants us to recognize that fact at a fundamental level, that every child who comes to this life is equal to another child. Once my son asked me that could I have been born elsewhere, I said, you are born everywhere. In every house there is a child just like you. And how many of us think like that? How many of us think that my needs are exactly like any other human being walking in the street? How many times a rich person thinks that his needs are exactly the same as that of the poorest man on earth? Why should a human being lie on the side of a street, homeless? And not only that, we are preventing him from developing his own self. Just look at me, the way I have developed myself, the way I have tried to become extremely conscious and expand my consciousness. Each child should be provided that opportunity to increase their consciousness and then expand it to the whole world and see how happy the world will be. Because presently we are too much focused on the physical needs and the physical side of our existence. Whereas we are not just physical, we also have cognitive abilities. And because of being focused on the physical side so much, we have created so much cognitive dissonance within our minds that most people are living life with a lot of conflicts in their mind. They have fights at a basic level, there are divorces, there's a child abuse, there's a children being beaten up, and we have crime everywhere, then we have drawn borders. I'll give you another example. If we are going, I noticed it many years ago that we were all in one aeroplane going from one place to another. The moment, and all of us were together, I talked to other passengers as well, and it was fine. The moment we landed at the airport, there were 3 lines. One was the European Union, another was non-European Union, one was another one. And I looked at it and I said, we were together. Why are we divided? We shouldn't be divided. We don't need to be divided because we are the same, exactly same human beings who are going to die one day and will take nothing with us except ourselves. And there is a life which is coming, which is immortality. And we are going to live forever. And what have we sent forward for that? And what we are sending forward for that is what we earn here. And if we do not follow these values, if we haven't understood it in the first place, how are we going to make this life better? And this is a problem we have, that the rich and powerful are thinking that might is right and they can get away with that. Fortunately, they cannot get away with the consequences of their wrongs. But the path which we are following without this guidance, which we require, and that is why the proof of Quran being not the intellect of human mind is within the Quran. It is a whole reality, whether we like it or don't like it. And we will have to come to this book at some point in time to resolve these issues. Otherwise, forget it, we can never solve human problems and poverty. We will remain miserable, we will live a life of misery, and then we will leave this life with not much hope in the hereafter.
The human intellect has devised systems over centuries, except for short times when the systems based on the revelation appeared and soon were replaced by man-made systems. Could you throw some light on this historical phenomena?
Yes. Another good question. Human beings don't like to have any influence on their free will. We want to use our own free will to make our own decisions. This is our default position, basic position. But as we lived our life, we devised certain systems, and those were always geared towards the rich and the powerful. As I said previously, that first human being who came to this earth, or the communities, they did not have any demarcated lines drawn on earth. Wherever they found earth, most of the economy was based on agriculture, and they earned their living from the earth, and they enjoyed it, and the tribes had some kind of a structure of leadership, and they lived fairly happily. But then the question of mine and yours came in, and we started drawing line. And when we started drawing lines, the land became mine and yours. And that is where the country's concept came in. And once the country's concept came in, then the wars came in, because one country wanted to snatch the other's right, and because they all wanted to accumulate more than they required. And that is where the colonialism came in. The history of human being is trial and tribulations, a trial and error, and we go through centuries of experience of trying one system and then come to that, and human intellect then comes to this conclusion. This experiment failed, let's start another experiment. And then that goes on for a few hundred years, and then we fight with each other, we create conflicts, millions die, and then we come to this conclusion that this experiment has also failed, let's go to the next one. You can see even today people are getting fed up with democracy, or one form of democracy and they want to have another one. There was the parliamentarian systems, now they are going to the proportional representation system. For example, in America now there's an argument and a discussion going on, it's a two-party system, we should have more than two. As if the two-party system has failed to provide solutions to these problems, and the 3 or the 4 or the 5 parties will make life easier. But problem will remain the same, because it is always the rich and powerful who get elected, because they have influence, they have money, and people's opinion can be changed, through media. Or Chomsky has mentioned that manufactured consent is part of it. Because if human beings don't have their own strong self, if they don't have their own values inside, they will be carried away by anything, because they don't have inner guidance. So that is where the Quran comes in, and it says that you will have to come to this system at some point in time in the future, because you will realize over continuously suffering at the hands of the rich and the powerful and those who manipulate you, that I'm not living my life to the full. And Eric Fromm has discussed in his books as well, that we leave this life, each one of us leaves this life without his own music being played to the full. And the answer for that lies in the Quran. And this is what I found in the Quran, that the Quran is the product of non-human intellect, because it has come from a fully developed intellect. And we shouldn't be scared of looking at the Quran, even academically. It doesn't hurt. Go and read it. These books like Human Self and Allah help us to look at alternative to what human beings have devised. If we like it, well, accept it. If we don't like it, leave it and keep living the life the way it is. But hereafter is a fact. And what is given in the Quran is a fact. I have tested it. And the reality which one creates by following the Quran, we simply cannot acquire that reality or achieve that reality without its values. So the proof of the Quran being from Allah is within it. In fact, it serves as a proof for the existence of Allah as well, because what is there is non-human. Because our modern psychology, in fact, all human work is based on this assumption that the life ends with death. And Quran's position is, the factual assumption is that the life goes beyond death. So two are totally different concepts of life. So if human beings, as long as they are living this life on this concept that the life ends with death, I'm afraid there is no solution to our problems.
In your view, you think human beings can solve the issue of poverty and the accumulation of wealth in the world, or it would continue forever?
It will continue till the time we come to the values of the Quran. Unless we come to the Quran and decide what do we want from our life, and do we want to go beyond our death and spend another successful life based on our deeds over here in the hereafter. And this is not a religious concept. It is totally non-emotive, non-religious, fact-based concept which we can verify ourselves. The reality which Quran helps us to create within us is a reality based on evidence. And we cannot create that reality without the values given in the Quran, without the attributes of Allah given in the Quran, without the laws, following the law of requital and law of respite. Law of respite is that the moment we do a deed, we don't get the results immediately. There is a time gap. And it's more true on a collective platform. The nations don't get destroyed or don't decline over 10 years or 20 years. It takes centuries for them to come down. Because whatever we do, the effects are inbuilt into it. So this poverty and inequality which we find in the world, human beings cannot solve it alone because we follow our desires. And why shouldn't I follow my desire? Why should I leave my desires for something better? So in fact, following the Quran gives us far more freedom, not only in this life, but the freedom of the hereafter. See, if we do not follow the Quran, we will be always scared of death. There is no hope. I'm going to die, full stop. If we follow the Quran, we have not only a hope, but we can see that there is a hereafter. And we are working for that, and as a consequence of that, I will get far more freedom, because I will not be then thinking about my family or my own self or a small city or a country. We will be looking at the universe as a whole. Over here, we are desperate to go to other universes as if we have solved the problem of our universe. The Quran focuses on the essentials. It tells us where to focus. For example, about the past, it says, those were the people, they have gone away, don't worry about them, you will not be questioned about them. You should concentrate on your life here. And all our life, a lot of people are more worried on what is lying beyond this universe and what was in the past. And these are okay from education point of view, from historical reference point of view, those are fine. But how do these going to solve my problem as far as my hereafter is concerned? That is the question which we should be asking. And from that point of view, Quran answers all these questions very logically and presents the hereafter as a tangible fact in front of us based on evidence. It is not otherworldly concept which says that you just believe into it. No. It is based on conviction, and it tells us how to develop that conviction as well. And it gives human models who did it. It says that if those models, those human beings could do it, you can do it, because you are born exactly the same way as those human beings were. So it is not otherworldly. It is very much part of this life, and it is a whole reality. We can't take bits and pieces out of it and say, I'm going to follow this and achieve the results. No. As a patient, I must take the complete prescription of the doctor and then follow the instructions as it says if I want to benefit and eliminate the ailments with which we are suffering in this world.
You have looked at the Quranic message in detail as a system of Deen. My question is that how should one convince of the Quranic guidance?
The way I look at it and the way I approach the Quran was through my own inner search. And when I looked at the problems of the world and also studied the capitalist system, communism, socialism, and the systems which are existing, because at the time prior to 90s, there was communism in the world as well. And I saw that what solution human intellect had produced was insufficient. For example, in one system, total freedom was lost under communism, and human beings had become totally mechanistic and animalistic. In the West, the exploitation was going on, and particularly at a lower level, poor were, the gap between the rich and poor was increasing. And what impact the capitalism had on the developing country and the underdeveloped world, for example, in Africa, in Asia, and in South America. So all these things prompted me to look at the wider issues of human decision making. And I looked at it myself, and from my inner voice, I can say from my own inner incentive or motivation, I said, okay, if people are not interested and they don't want to look at the Quran, and you'll be surprised that even Muslims don't want to look at the Quran. I remember I talked to one of my cousins, and he said, brother, for me, Quran is a book of Allah, and that's enough. I said, but have you read it? He said, no, I haven't read it. I don't need to read it. And he was right, because he did not need to read it. Most of the human beings don't feel a need to read it. And the problem is that we are never going to come back to this life. So to motivate us to read the Quran lies within us. We shouldn't be scared of it. It is not going to, if I'm reading the Quran, it is not going to grab me and say, no, you will have to follow it. No. The Quran very clear says there is no compulsion in Deen. The path of light and path of darkness have been made clear. If you want to go to the light, you will have the advantages of living a life under light. If you want to live under darkness, you are, in fact, our default position according to the Quran is darkness. So we need light. When the sunshine comes, darkness disappears. So Quran calls itself light, and it is factually a light, and it illuminates our mind, and we can see things which we never saw before. And that is how humanity, and nowadays in a world of social media, I think it is important for the common people as well to read the book, to study the book, Read these books which have been published and are Amazon. These are at the lowest price, that is, there is no profit added to these are cost price. These are also available on islamicdawn.com. And if there are any questions, they can always email islamicdawn.com and these can be addressed or answered. So it is extremely logical. It literally will give us new life because we will look at our life in a different way, in a wider spectrum, globally, and be part of it. And then if we decide to follow this path, then not only our later part of this life will be happier and more contented and successful, but we will also have the assurance of the hereafter.
Seeing the problems of today's world, one may think that second stage, life in the hereafter, could have been started without adding this first stage at the front by Allah. Could you put some light on the purpose of human creation?
Yes, good question. Actually, I made this comment a few years back in one of my talks, that why did, common man, when he looks at the misery in the world and injustices, inequality, and one part of the world is enjoying all the benefits of science and development and technology. Another word is the children picking up food from rubbish heaps. Then any sensitive human being thinks that why did Allah create this world in the first place? Why not the second stage could have been started without creating the first place? And the Quran has very interestingly, the Quran has given our default position wherein metaphorically there is a conversation between angels and Allah, where angels are told that Allah is going to create. It is in the second chapter. Right. Where it says that Allah told the angels that Adam is being created. And he said, why do you create Adam with a free will? Because he is going to shed blood and create problems and conflicts. Whereas we do as you ask us to do, and we follow the laws. And Allah says that we taught Adam the ability to characterize things and give names and recognize them and develop concepts. And then Quran says that Allah does not say that He will not. The angels, when angels said He will create problems, Allah does not say, no, He will not create problems. What He says is that after teaching all these to Adam, answered some of the questions, whereas angels failed to answer that questions. And Adam then is put into a paradise where he gets into conflicts. And as a consequence of those conflicts with each other, he loses that paradise. Remember, I said that human beings, when they came onto this earth as a product of evolution, they could eat anywhere and drink anywhere and live anywhere. And they could till any land and all the produce was available to everyone. But then they started drawing lines and divided themselves into parties and tribes and countries. And then Quran says that we will send you, your default position will be of conflicts, which we see around the world. And then it says that the Quran says that Allah says that we will send you the guidance, and whoever follows the guidance, they will have no fear and grief. See, the interesting thing over here in this line is that whoever follows this guidance will have no fear and grief. So fear and grief is the consequence of following the guidance. It is not said that you should not have grief and fear. What it says is that as a consequence of following this, following or accepting this prescription, your ailments, your conflicts will disappear. So whatever is happening in the world, it is given in the Quran, and it says when you will not follow this external guidance, which is given to you free and is from someone who is all-knowing and all-powerful. And if you follow this guidance, these are the results you will get. If you do not follow this guidance, these are the results you will get. And the results we see in the world are because we are not following it. We are too much focused on the mechanistic or the material side of this life, and we are considering that this body only defines us. We have nothing up in our head. And the day we will come to this conclusion through our own intellect's action and our own reasoning, we will come to this conclusion that life is meant to be enjoyed, not to be made miserable. And the life of conflict is a very unhappy life.
Why people find hard to come the Quranic guidance, and how should one present its message so that it can appeal to their inner self?
The difficulty is that we want to follow our desires. We want to make our own decisions, and we don't want to be constrained or restricted by somebody else. Even as a child, we will see the children, they want to make their own decisions. And parents have to continuously tell them, don't do that, don't do that. And same goes for as we live our life. And that is why they say teenage rebellion, because children go against the parents. Because they want to test their own decision making, and they want to follow their own desires. And this is the conflict which creates the conflict in the world and within the families, within the societies, within the countries as well. And that is why, in democracy we have parties and they are continuously fighting with each other to seek power. Whereas the Quran's position is different. It is saying that you being at a fundamental level exactly the same human beings, and you have laws, and you have a choice to make any decision, but you do not have a choice to have the effects or the consequences according to your own desire. And if we look at this, we will see that whatever we do in life has consequences. And that is why I have heard on the television, a lady came and she said, oh, I thought that by following my mother, I will have different consequences. But it doesn't. If we keep doing the same thing again and again, we should expect the same results. So what we are finding in the world is that these conflicts are because we do not have higher purpose of life. We do not know. We think that the life will end with death, whereas the life is factually going to go beyond death. And for that, we will have to come to the Quran as one book. This is not your book or my book, it is Allah's book. And He is Allah of everyone. He is the Allah of the universe. And the book is for whole of mankind. This book doesn't belong to any one community. Whoever wants to seek guidance and is not happy with the way he or she is living their life, they should also possibly explore it and see whether it has the recipe for their issues. So this is where the Quran is. So it is a very much internal thing. Nobody can impose their will on me. I want to make my own decisions. The only thing is, if I know that my decisions have consequences and I want to have good consequences of my decisions, then I need external guidance. My desires and my intellect cannot guide me alone. And amazingly, it doesn't restrict my freedom. Actually, as they say that if I don't have the power to do wrong, then my being good is meaningless. So while I know both paths, I select the path which gives me the optimum results because I've got a limited life.
Thanks very much for your time and views on these issues.
Thank you very much. I'm glad we covered the salient features of the Quran and its significance as far as human life is concerned. Thank you very much.